Hi everybody, Amber here. Welcome back to In Conversation with ATF. My guest today is a comic book writer, an artist, a penciler, and he's pretty much one of the main reasons why Transformers is a thing today. You may know him as working. I just messed up my lines. You may know him from writing the Transformers comics for Marvel in the 80s, and he also wrote the film, the Transformers movie, as a comic as well in 2006, if I remember correctly. If
That's
that's right.
correct. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Sweet. He also named the Transformers. I nearly said I nearly said Magnet. I was like, there isn't a Transformer called Magnet.
There's one called Ultra Magnets.
Ultra Magnet. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Ultra Magnet. It's just, yep. So, okay. He is best known for naming some of the Transformers, including Megatron, Ratchet, Starscream, and the little Decepticon Panther Ravage. I mean, I would show you. Actually, I've got him right here. He's a memory stick. I got it off Wish. It was like, it's this, and then you transform it, and he transforms into Ravage. And that's what things is memory stick. Hold on. Get it up there. Over there. Wait. There we go. That's quite
Very
cool.
nice.
Yeah. He's overseen titles at Marvel in the 90s, including Spider-Man, Daredevil, and the Fantastic Four. My guess is pretty much the prime reason why Transformers exists as a brand today. My guest is Mr. Bob Budiansky. Hi.
Hello, Amber. Pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on my show, definitely, Bob. And honestly, I managed to say your name right the second time. That was the second take because I said Budiansky. I was like, out of all the things I could have got wrong, it had to be the pronunciation of the
It's
main
not wrong.
vowel.
It's just an alternate way of saying it. It's okay.
I suppose, yeah. Well, yeah.
Don't stress over it. It's okay. It's
Okay.
okay.
Okay, we're okay
Yeah.
now. How are you doing today, Bob?
Doing
Everything
great.
good?
Had a lovely day so far. Getting my work done.
That is good. That is good to hear. Actually, I've got to ask you, what are you up to nowadays? Are you still writing comics or
No, no. My work these days is I'm the recreation director from my town. So I'm in charge of a lot of different things, including town-wide events. We have a big event coming up this coming Sunday, our holiday celebration.
Oh wow.
Santa Claus at the train station.
Oh wow, that's really cool.
So
And
that's
I
what I'm working
believe,
on.
oh, well, that's really cool. You're on the East Coast, right?
Right.
Okay. Well, I knew, but I was just just pointing it out for the viewers who obviously weren't there before we started recording. So you've always been on the East Coast, if I'm
Yeah,
being correct.
I grew up in New York City, and now myself, my family, we live in New Jersey, which is real close to New York City. And yes, I've always been an East Coast boy.
Oh, that's nice. And I presume you've obviously visited other places for maybe conventions and stuff. I mean,
Oh
maybe the
yeah, yeah,
TF
yeah. I've
Con.
seen a lot of the country. Yes. So as I'm sure at least some, if not all, your listeners know, there are 50 states in this country, and I've been to 42 of them. So
That's
so
impressive.
only eight more states to go.
Have you been to
As
California?
well as being in England a few times. Yeah.
Have you been to California?
Oh yes.
Ah, right,
Yeah,
okay.
bunch of times.
I was gonna say, because of course I've got to bring it up. You are a part of the Generation One reunion that is happening at TFCon LA this upcoming March, and honestly, like I thought it was just going to be the voice actors from the G1 series. Just to see you there with everybody else, it's just I was like, oh my god, I've got to get Bob on my show. Like seriously. Like, of course, so far I think we've had as of recording this 27th of November, we've had Peter Cullen, Dan Govazan, Michael Bell, and Laurie Fazzo. So we've literally got Optimus, Bumblebee, Prowl, and Sideswipe, and Orion Pax. So far,
Okay.
good lineup. Good lineup. What are your thoughts on it? Are you looking forward to it? Well, obvious question, but you know.
Oh yes, yes. I enjoy going to conventions. The TF cons have been really fun for me. I haven't been to one in Los Angeles yet, but I've been to several other TF cons and bot cons, which are very similar. And it's always great meeting up with all the fans and them sharing their stories about how when they were growing up they read my comic books or or whatever it was about Transformers that I may have had a hand in that somehow touched them in their formative years. So hopefully for positive, in a positive way. Usually it is. Nobody turns into a serial killer, as far as I know. They're all very all happy to meet me. I'm always happy to talk to them and meet them. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to going out to Los Angeles in March for the TF Con.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Have you ever been to TF Nation, which is basically the UK TF Con, BotCon equivalent?
Possibly.
It was called Auto Assembly a few years ago. So
Yeah, I went to a TF Con of some sort in now I'm trying to remember. I think it was in
Birmingham.
Birmingham.
Yeah, that's where Auto
Yeah, it was
Assembly is.
about 6 years ago, maybe 5 or I don't know. It was pre-COVID by a year or two, like 2019, 2018. I forget.
Might have been.
So I don't remember the exact name of it, but if it was TF Nation, then that's what it was.
I think it might have been, because I've just had a look and it's yes, I think it is. Maybe yes, you were there in 2017.
There you go. Okay, so
yeah, because I'm literally looking at
6 years ago. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember I had a really nice time there, hanging out
Oh,
with
that's good to hear.
my wife. My wife came, and my daughter came, and I think met up with Simon Ferman when he was there. So yeah, it was a good
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm having a look. Yeah. Oh my gosh, like Venus Turzo was there, Hal Rail was there. Oh my gosh. Some good people. Some good people were there that year.
Okay.
Oh, wish I was into Transformers back then. But obsessions happen, and I only got into it during when COVID first started. So it was really, when all the cons had shut down. So I was just in lockdown in my little bedroom watching all the Transformers series. So that was quite fun. Have you always wanted to be a comic book artist? How did you really get your start? What was it that made you realize, okay, this is what I want to do when I'm older?
Well, I grew up reading comic books when I was a child. From age, I think I was first aware of them by the time I was 5 years old. I have two older brothers, so they would bring comic books into our apartment building. Into our apartment, I should say. And so I look at their comics, and then in a few years, I was able to get my own comics. I had my little allowance. I was able to spend my money on buying my own comic books. And I just grew up reading comics, loving comics, and wanting to be a comic book artist. And then eventually, I had an opportunity to get an entry-level editorial position at Marvel Comic Books. And I dropped out of graduate school and took the job. And then I stayed at Marvel for 20 years, almost 20 years.
And what was it that, were there any cartoons maybe that inspired you with obviously your artwork and your comic book? Is there any specific
Well, when you say
cartoons?
cartoons, I know cartoons as like animated Saturday morning cartoons here in the States. So I wouldn't say that inspired me. What inspired me were the comic books, the artwork I saw in the comic books themselves, the stories that were in the comics. I found them really appealing to my imagination. They're mind expanding in their way. So yes, I was really into it for a number of years. And then when I got to high school, which would have been ninth grade for me, I said, okay, I'm in high school now. I think I've had enough with comic books. So I stopped collecting them and buying them, and then I moved on. And then I got to college, and I got interested in comics again when I got to college. And so I picked up the habit again to some degree. And I was always drawing a lot. I was drawing for my college newspaper for a number of years. And like I said, then an opportunity came up through a friend for interviewing for this entry-level editorial position at Marvel Comics. Actually, since you happen to be, from Great Britain, it was in the Marvel British department, that was the first job I had. It was in the Marvel British department, which basically handled doing reprint material for the market in the United Kingdom, I guess.
Yeah.
Whatever. So we would just prepare the comics so that they could be reprinted in your marketplace. And back then, your market was very different than ours in the way things were scheduled. Marvel Comics, American comics in general, would come out once a month. And to my understanding, in Great Britain, they came out once a week. Back in the I started in 1976. Back in that era, that was how they were published. So we had to reformat them to quite a degree so they would fit your publishing schedule.
Yeah, yeah, and that does remind me because a lot of the Transformers VHS tapes in the 80s that were released in the UK, I would say the artwork is inconsistent, like sort of like dated, I suppose, because it would be like season 3 episodes on a tape, but Optimus Prime is on the cover, or like the episodes of the Headmasters series, but then there's like season 2 artwork on the front cover. It was really weird how that sort of worked over here.
Are you talking about printed comics? You're talking about, you say season 2, season 3. I'm not sure. I'm not following.
Oh no, just the VHS tapes that were released
okay,
over here.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I have no connection with the animated TV series, so I wouldn't know anything about that.
So you never worked on the G1 show at all. You've only just been based in the comic book. Right, okay.
Just working for Marvel Comics. My only connection with the animated TV show is that since I did provide Hasbro with names and character profiles for most of the characters that came out between 1984 and 1989, which was during the time when the animated show was out for some of those years anyway. They would, once they approved whatever it was that I was submitting, they would just make copies of that and then forward it to Sunbow Productions, which is the company that put out the animated show. So to say, okay, here's the name of this new toy character and here's his personality. And then whatever Sunbow decided to do with it after that for their, for the sake of their animated shows, I have no idea. It wasn't like they consulted with me or had any direct connection with me, but I would provide this initial information on who the characters are and what their names are.
That's really cool. And how did you come up with the names for like specific Transformers? Especially what I'm curious to know about is Megatron.
Okay, so Megatron. All right, so the way it worked in general was Hasbro would provide me with some kind of reference material. So I had an idea of what it was I was being asked to name. So initially, Hasbro gave me the actual toys because, as perhaps you and your audience knows, initially Hasbro made a deal with 2 Japanese toy companies to license their toys and just basically rebrand them as Transformers. And so the toys existed. So Megatron is a good example. The Megatron toy already existed from the Japanese toy company. So they gave me the actual toy. As Transformers became successful and Hasbro needed more toys to put out, more new toys, they didn't have the toys yet to give me, so they gave me model sheets, which are basically diagrams of what the characters look like in their various forms. So that was my reference. But anyway, whatever the reference was that they gave me, they had to give me something so I could base my ideas on whatever it was the toy's supposed to be. And in the case of Megatron, all I knew was, okay, he's this big guy who turns into a gun, and he's the head of the bad guys, the Decepticons. Okay, that was basically what I had to work with. And so Megatron, the name came from a couple of things. Mega. Now, back in the 1970s, before personal computers became a thing, Mega had a very negative connotation. Typically, it was associated with nuclear weaponry, which was calculated in terms of megatons, which was a measure of how much damage a nuclear bomb can do. Megatons or kilotons, but megatons was a very common word back then. So I thought the idea of mega had this kind of menacing, threatening, powerful sound to it. And Tron is just a very standard suffix for things that are technical, electronic, that sort of thing. So neutron, proton, neutron, electron, Tron. Okay, there's even a movie called Tron, come to think of it. So I just put them together, Megatron. And I thought that has a really nice ring to it. And I submitted it with a whole bunch of other stuff to Hasbro because Hasbro had to approve everything. And Hasbro rejected the name.
Really?
Yes. So now I was just starting out working through Marvel for Hasbro, and I was very aware that this is their product, their toy. They get to call the shots. I don't have any decision making in any of this, but I really like the name. So I asked my contact over at Hasbro, um, look, you can do what you want, but I'm just curious, what is it about Megatron that you didn't like? But they would have to, they would look at it for all different reasons. They would show it to the legal department to see if it was infringing on somebody else's trademark on some other product or something. But I really didn't have any idea why they rejected Megatron. So anyway, my liaison came back to me and she said, well, here's the reason. We think it sounds too scary. So that was a curious response, I thought. So I said to her, well, you know, he's the leader of the bad guys. He's supposed to sound scary. And apparently the people at Hasbro who made this decision hadn't looked at it that way. Like, oh yeah, he's the main bad guy. He should be scary. You know, they just thought it sounded scary and it might scare their audience of some, you know, kids who might buy the toy or something. I don't know. So when I put it that way, that he's supposed to sound scary, they reconsidered and they approved it. So Megatron came that close to being rejected. And I still think that's the best name I came up with.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have any alternative names that you probably would have gone for if
when I would turn in my profiles, my character profiles, I would always add a couple of one or two alternative names, but they weren't as good. I remember one was Slag Maker. That was one I remember. That was an alternative, not nearly as I don't know, poetic sounding as Megatron. You know, Megatron just has a nice, you know, a nice beat to it or something. Megatron, you know. So it just, you know, I would have lost that with something like Slag Maker. So I'm happy that that's reconsidered.
Yeah, it was always good to get a second chance.
Yes, yes. I think I was the only one that I asked for a second chance on, actually. Yeah. Most of the names I submitted, they accepted anyway. The first shot. There's only a handful that they rejected for one reason or another.
And what about Starscream?
So Starscream is interesting because I guess Starscream became a big thing, you know, a big character to the audience out there through the animation and maybe
yeah,
I don't know. But you know, when I first came up with Starscream, he was one of a trio. So you might know that in the initial set of Decepticons that were released by Hasbro in 1984, there were three jet fighters. They were all identical. They were just painted differently. So I was given the task of naming these three bad guy jet fighters, and so all I was doing was putting words together that had a connotation of the sky or the heavens above and something threatening. So I came up with Thundercracker, you know, thunder being something that happens in the skies, and cracker sounds kind of menacing or, you know,
the crackling of thunder.
Something.
Yeah.
Skywarp. So again, something in the sky, literally sky. Warp is just something that, like, you know, warping something can be, you know, like stretching, bending, you know, doing something, mutating.
As well. Yeah,
so Skywarp was the second one, and Starscream was the third one. So they were all kind of created on an equal basis to my mind, but Starscream clearly is the breakout star of that group. And it's a good name. I guess people were attracted to the sound of that name or something.
Yeah, and especially
but that was the original. That was the original motivation for those three. I just wanted to put together something having to do with the heavens and the skies with something that sounded a little bit scary or dangerous.
Yeah. And of course, that carries over to the TV series because Thundercracker and Skywarp, they sort of are like kind of low voices, but then Starscream had this like really high pitched villain voice. Like,
oh yeah, well, see, that's something that the animators, the people behind the animation, put together. Again, not connected to any of that.
Yeah,
I guess they knew something. They knew what they were doing. Make Starscream stand out like that.
Yeah, definitely. And what about actually? Well, this might be an easy one for you. Ravage.
So Ravage is the result of a rejected name. I actually had a different name for Ravage. I'm trying to remember if I What was it? I don't know, but they rejected it. Hasbro rejected that name. I think there was some kind of legal problem with it, like some trademark problem that they were, avoiding. So I had to come up with an alternate. I had to come up with an alternate name, and Ravage was the alternate name, which in retrospect was a better name than I had it initially.
Yeah.
And just Ravage, Ravage is this little tape cassette that turns into this beast, this kind of jaguar type beast. And I just wanted to come up with a name that sounded violent, like a violent action. And ravaging something is kind of violent, right? So it has a nice swing to it. So there you go.
Yeah, that's pretty much what Ravage does in the comics and TV shows, every single media. Just it's like Ravage ravages at Autobots.
Yeah, it's very suggestive of what he's about. That's my goal of most of the names I came up with. It should suggest something about the character.
Yeah. So what happened sort of post Transformers in the 1980s? So this would have been the period when you would have still been at Marvel, I suppose. Were you still at Marvel? Did you kind of like?
You have to know that you have to realize something. So most of the time I worked on Transformers, which is from November of '83. Actually, I started working on Transformers 40 years ago last week. It was right before. Wow. I mean, we just had a major holiday here in the States, Thanksgiving. I started working on it the weekend before Thanksgiving of 1983. Wow. So just celebrated my 40th anniversary, starting my tenure on Transformers. And I quit Transformers in 1989. Actually happened in London when I quit it, of all places. Yeah. But that's a different story. I can tell you that later. So I've kind of deviated. What was the question again? I was
really, what did you do after you
stopped working? So it wasn't like I just did Transformers all that time. Transformers was my freelance job. When I was working on all those biographies and all those names, that was something I did freelance. When I was writing the book, which I wrote about 50 issues of the comic book, that was freelance. I had a day job as an editor at Marvel all throughout that time. So it wasn't like I put aside Transformers and started a brand new job. I just started new freelance work, but I had a day job as a Marvel editor. So the whole time I was working on Transformers, initially I was the Marvel Special Projects editor. I was a Marvel Special Projects editor for most of those years, which meant that I worked on anything that wasn't a mainstream Marvel comic. So, for instance, Transformers. Initially, I was the editor of the 4-issue miniseries of Transformers. The Transformers was not a mainstream comic book. It was a licensed comic book based on a toy. And then I worked on some other toy books. And I worked on movie adaptations. And I worked with the National Football League on a comic book for them. And I worked on a lot of. I worked on our Marvel retail poster program, which is creating poster artwork that we sold through the retail shops. So I did a whole bunch of different things at Marvel during those years. Prior to me working on Transformers, I was working on as a mainstream editor, which included the Fantastic Four, Daredevil comic books, and a bunch of others. And then after I was no longer Special Projects editor, I worked as a Spider-Man editor. And, I had a lot of other things going on over the years. But I always worked as an editor throughout that period. I worked on Transformers. The only time I was working on Transformers as an editor was when I worked on the miniseries that I just mentioned.
I see.
That was part of my day job. Yeah.
But all the other stuff
was all the other stuff was as a freelancer, including I drew 5 different covers for the Transformers. So that was again freelance work, not my day job.
Right. Thank you for clarifying, Bob. Really good.
Sure.
I really do appreciate it. So, Bob.
Yes.
When you worked on Transformers the movie in 2006, the comic, how did it feel to sort of return to working on Transformers after all these years?
So, okay, honestly, working on a movie adaptation isn't really getting completely immersed in anything, in my opinion, because you're given a script. And then you just have to pick out the parts of the script that will make a good comic book. It's not like I'm creating it all. I mean, you're kind of editing down a script into a comic book form. So it was nice to revisit it. I had never watched the movie, actually, even though I was the editor of the first adaptation of that movie, which was back in 1986. when I was working at Marvel. And so now 2006, 20 years later, I was the writer of another adaptation of the same movie. So I had some familiarity with it. So I got to watch it, and then I was just picking out pieces of it so that I can make a comic book adaptation that made some sense. So it was fun working on it. And I think that the best part of it was working with, oh geez, now I'm blanking out. The artist on that book was terrific. And I have the book somewhere nearby. I want to give him credit, but it was great working with this guy because he just was so good at drawing Transformers. One big difference between the artists I worked with and the artists of, oh, here it is, right here. And working with an artist like, I'm going to find his name in a moment. Forgive me to slowing up the works here. Okay, sorry, you're gonna have to cut some of this out. Don Figueroa, working with an artist like Don Figueroa, is that Don Figueroa really loved drawing Transformers and showed in every panel he drew. And the artists that I worked with as an editor and as a writer were complete professionals, but they would rather be drawing something else than robots, with lots of reference materials they had to refer to. They were interested in drawing people. So so they were from a different generation. They weren't like, they didn't grow up reading Transformers or watching the animation. They were just comic book professionals, and this was a job to them, and they did a great job. But they weren't like a guy like Don Figueroa, who clearly loved the property and loved drawing these characters. So that was the best part of working on the movie adaptation, getting a chance to work with him.
That's awesome. Yeah, it honestly sounds like you had a good time working on that.
Yeah, it was nice being involved again. Yes.
It's like you and Don like properly care about the brand. You cared about the brand when you were working.
I don't want to speak too much for Don. I don't want to, I don't know him that well. I just worked a little bit with him back then. I think he came at it from a different angle than me, since he's from a younger generation than me. Like he really grew up loving the Transformers.
Yeah.
And I've told this to many times to many different Transformer fans at many different Transformers panels, at many different Transformers conventions, is that for me, it was a job. Okay. I didn't seek out the Transformers because I loved all things about toys that are robotic, that turn into other toys. That wasn't it. It was a job. Now, as a job, I put my entire creative energy into it and did as good a job as I could, but it was still a job. So, and once I left Transformers, it wasn't like I dwelled on it. Like I continued to follow all things Transformers. Like fans come up to me, they know far more about Transformers and their history than I do, because my history with them really ended in 1989. So I have some inkling of other things that have popped up over the years having to do with Transformers, obviously the movies, for instance. But I haven't been totally involved with them over the years. I've moved on from that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Bit of a hard question for you. Who would you say out of all the Transformers that you've named, who is your favorite?
Well, okay, first I'm going to deflate you a little bit by saying it's not a hard question. I've been asked this many times.
Oh, it's over. Okay. It's usually a hard question for some people when they say, who's your favorite?
You're going to have to try harder to trip me up on a question like this. Anyway, no, but of the stories that I wrote, the best stories involved Blaster. So he was my favorite character to write, because some of the best stories featured him prominently in the story.
Yeah.
So that's the answer.
So you named Blaster.
I named Blaster.
Wow. So I'm presuming that you didn't name Soundwave then?
I named Soundwave.
Oh, you named Soundwave.
I named about 250 characters.
Oh my gosh. I didn't know to the full extent. This is me getting schooled by you. This is actually really cool.
From 1983 to 1989, I named almost all the Transformers, not the ones that were featured in the movie that came out in 86. Those were named by the movie studio, whoever produced.
I was going to say, I don't think Optimus was named by you, was it?
Optimus Prime was not named by me. There were two characters in the initial batch that were not named by me. Optimus Prime was one of them. But of the first 26 characters that came out, I named 24 of them over a weekend, over that first weekend before Thanksgiving of 1983. So I had to turn into work by that Monday. So anyway, so I named most of them. Hasbro liked what I did. Marvel liked what I did. So I continued naming characters for the next 4 years or whatever it was, 4 or 5 years. And so out of that tenure, I named about 250 characters. And as a result, since we're talking about all my accomplishments on Transformers, in 2010, Hasbro started a Transformers Hall of Fame. And there was 4 humans that were inducted into the Hall of Fame that first year. And I am one of them.
Ah, yes, I did hear about that. You inducted alongside Peter Cullen, I think it might have been. Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, that was at a Transformers Con in Orlando, Florida. So
yeah.
So anyway, because I did, provide a lot of material for them to build on, but I wasn't the only one. But I did my share.
Yeah. And aside from Optimus, as you said, who was the other Transformer in the original batch that you didn't name?
I believe it was Prowl or Hound. I always get those two confused. One or the other. I named one of them and I didn't name the other one. I think it was perhaps Hound, but I can't be sure. I'd have to look it up, and I don't know if you have time, but
that's okay.
I'd have to look it up on some material I have. But in any case,
I was going to say, if not, I'll just edit it in and just clarify which one was the one that you named.
Yeah. So before I was hired by my editor-in-chief to work on Transformers, there was another writer who was hired, and he turned in a bunch of names. And for whatever reason, the editor-in-chief, oh, here it is. This is the original treatment of the Transformers. I did not write it. The editor-in-chief wrote it. So this has the original names that were, a couple of the original names that were, so this proves it. Okay, so Optimus Prime and Prowl are on this treatment. Okay, you can see, I don't know if you can see that. So I didn't write this. So somebody else, so the other writer wrote those names. So I guess I came up with Hound that name.
Came up with Hound.
Hound was one of them. Anyway, so I came up with that one, but Prowl and Optimus Prime. But all the others that were in an initial batch of 26 Transformers, I did ultimately come up with their names. As well as many others.
Yeah. You said something before about the UK branch of Marvel, and then when you left or something, I can't remember. You said something about a story that you'd say later on. I'm kind of intrigued to what.
Oh yeah. I was saying that I stayed on the book until 1989. And I quit, and I actually quit in London. So what happened was I was on vacation in England in February of 1989. And I met Simon Ferman for lunch in London. And I'm sure you know who Simon Ferman is.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sure, a lot of your listeners know as well. So he was the writer doing the Transformers fill-in comic books for the English market, or the British market, I should say. And we met for lunch, and I said, Simon, I've been trying to get off this book for months now. I want to move on to doing some other things. Would you be interested in taking it over? And he was, sure, I'd love to. So he wound up taking over writing the American book as well. Now, just let me digress for a moment. As the writer of the Transformers, it's not my job to find my successor. It's the editor's job. But the editor kind of, he knew me. And when I came back to the States to meet up with my editor, I said, Simon Ferman's willing to take over writing the book, and he was fine with that. So, my editor was fine with that. So that's how it worked out. So I continued, for a couple more months, finishing up whatever it was I was doing, and then Simon took over.
Ah, right. So see, Petey's very vocal about it as well.
Petey is very upset that I quit the book, I guess. Yes, Petey, my dog. For those of you who hear the barking in the background. Yes.
You have to give him like a little Optimus Prime, maybe a little coat or something, or like a little head thing, maybe like a little costume for him.
You might accept.
Sorry, not Optimus. Not my head's not on straight. Megatron. I don't know why I was thinking of Optimus then. It's like a little bucket head, and then actually a little fusion gun. It's like a little dog just prancing around. Right, Bob. It's time. The big question, right? Who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? What's it gonna be? This.
Okay.
Oh, this is the big question. 40 years on, of course, from you joining. You didn't join. You joined Marvel in
1976.
Right. Okay. Sorry, it was not you joining Marvel. Okay. So 40 years on from the actual Transformers brand starting up, well, technically, like this year, next year is the 40th anniversary of the brand. Did you think back then, at 40 years on, it would still be as big and as popular now.
I had no idea that we would be talking today, 40 years later. No, it's unimaginable. You know, but the Transformers, when I left the book, was a dying brand. It was, as a toy, it was a dying brand. And I remember one of the Hasbro executives, I had no idea, I had no knowledge of the toy industry. So I remember at one point early on, one of the toy executives said, from Hasbro, said, if a toy lasts two Christmas seasons, it's considered a success. Two, you know, like they put new toys are rolled out typically in the fall of a particular year, so they could sell a lot of toys throughout the holiday season, right? So if it lasts 2 seasons, according to this executive from Hasbro, that's considered a success. So I was on Transformers through 1989, and it was a dying brand, but they already got like 5 years out of it. So, you know, from 84 through 89. So that's a pretty good run, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know it was going to come back in the late 90s with the Beast Wars, and then in the 2000s with the live action movies. So I had no idea when I was working on it that anything I was writing, anything I was creating as a writer would still be current today. People would still be asking me questions about it today. These books that I wrote would still be, they're always being reprinted. Whoever has the license to Transformers always.
Used to be IDW, but I think they announced that they're not going to be doing it anymore. I think.
Well, I think now Image Comics has the right to. Image Comics have the books. So, but over the years, you know, Titan and Dreamwave and IDW, you know, there's reprint editions of my books all over the place, you know, and we're 40 years into it, right? And they're still putting them out, and there's still people coming up to me asking me about it. So no, I had no idea that this would still be a thing so many years later.
Well, Bob, I'm so glad that you could join me on my show 40 years later to still, you know, discuss all things Transformers and, you know, like all your work and everything like that. So honestly, thank you, Bob. It's been a real honor to talk to you.
And it was very nice to talk to you and to meet you, Amber. So
it's very nice to meet you. Yeah, I hope you have a great day as well. Where can we find you on the internet? Have you got a website? Have you got any social media? Is there anything you'd like to
contact me? For anybody out there, the best way to contact me is look me up on Facebook. Okay, there aren't many Bob Budianskys out there, I can assure you. So if you find a name Bob Budiansky on Facebook, it's probably me. Okay.
I was going to say, because I did search you up, and I thought I saw like more than once. I was like, who's it going to be? I don't know. Sweet. I'll get them all linked in the description to you at home. Thank you so much for watching this episode of In Conversation with ATF featuring the lovely Bob Budiansky. That's weird how I said that, Bob Budiansky. I say like Budiansky. It's like it's how I.
You're really obsessing about my name. I don't know.
If anything ends in ski, like I just love that particular type of name. Like I don't know why, it just sounds really nice. Like I just want my last name to be Amber something Ski. I think that'd be quite cool.
Jonesky.
Jonesky, Amber Jonesky.
Jonesky. You could be Amber Jonesky. Okay.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, actually, you're right. Hang on a second. I could actually just add a perfect. There we go. It could be Amber Jonesky or Amber Janeski.
Okay,
oh my gosh, that is actually so cool. So thank you again for watching this episode, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody. Bye, and cut.